Aren't we all just looking for a roadmap for how to live in this rapidly evolving digital world? Today I'm talking with a high-tech executive who has lived his entire professional life in the world of online. We'll discuss how his career offers lessons for all IT leaders as we adapt to our changing world. My name is Charles Araujo, and this is the TransformIT Show, presented by the Intel IT Center. I'm in Los Angeles to sit down with Peter Van Camp, better known as PVC, Executive Chairman of Equinix, to discuss coping with constant change, reinvention, and staying in tune with customers. PVC, welcome to the TransformIT Show.
Thank you, Charlie.
So one of the reasons I'm so excited about this particular interview is that I think this is a little bit like Back to the Future to me. You have lived your entire professional life in the world of online, what we now would probably call cloud, but it is a world that most of us are just beginning to really inhabit. And so tell us a little bit about your career and how you've gotten here.
I guess I had the good fortune to land in front of it all about 35 years ago. The career began in remote computing services called time-sharing at the time. What's funny to look back on is how similar that business model was to really what the cloud is today. But it really started to get interesting when I joined CompuServe in the early 80s. For those who don't predate the internet, CompuServe was kind of the pioneer. Online services, apps, email, and that was an interesting time for me because I began to sell electronic mail when there was nothing on the desktop but a telephone and a Rolodex. So you can imagine explaining that to an executive and why it's going to improve his productivity. But those were interesting. We had to use dumb asynchronous terminals with a dial-up modem, and the data rate for that, you could, I think if you were good, you could actually out-type how fast the character could get forwarded. And I think back now, antiquated, the things we take for granted is downloading a Netflix movie today. At that time, I suspect it would have been measured from days to weeks. I'd have to do that math, but it just really shows how different it was. But CompuServe in the mid-90s acquired by WorldCom. And WorldCom was amassing all these internet and telecom assets, but the great thing that happened for me and frankly my team was we were merged with UUNet. UUNet was the disruptive internet provider, very much focused on business, not consumer users, and they were laying down the connectivity to the business world to the public internet. And very interesting time, high growth, new networking approaches where we were doing VPNs, no longer frame relay or private line network, very much a change that actually really even disrupted WorldCom's world because they had acquired MCI and had all those legacy technologies. But all of that said, WorldCom had amassed all these different assets, didn't lead it very well, didn't execute well. In fact, I could see it would collapse under its own weight, and that was about the time, 2000, when the founders of Equinix came and visited me. And I saw the vision here, this idea of interconnecting all the disparate networks in our data center so they could trade their traffic. The internet could operate or interoperate between all these networks. So for the past 15 years since that decision, I've been able to watch it all unfold, because we're at the intersection point of all these networks. So every technology change from video to big data to social media to mobility, all of those things are touching us. And I've had a front row seat to see it all unfold, and it's shaped a lot of the decisions we've made over that period of time.
So for those that maybe don't know who Equinix is, can you just briefly give us a little sense of the business that Equinix is in?
Sure. We build and run data centers now all over the world, but the primary thing the founder's vision has, and we've enabled, the vision has been, is to be the interconnection point for all the networks that make up our digital world. We have 1,000 different networks today who are customers and come to our data centers to trade their traffic. So, and if they aren't trading air traffic, then they're dropping them off at other customers who are key destinations on the internet. You could name them all, or now as the cloud has emerged, the place where cloud service providers can connect to the enterprises who want to consume IT from them.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, right? I think sometimes cloud is just the term we use now, but it's really been this constant evolution, and that's what I find so fascinating about your career, because you've basically been at the center of this storm that has been growing and really driving change into our industry for the last 25, 30 years now, from that beginning. Yep. And so I guess my question is, having lived in this world, what is the one big thing that as we move into this online cloud-based world from your career that everyone should be paying attention to right now?
Well, you have to be very comfortable and accept change. And it will be constant, and you know this, you talk about it, it's accelerating. And so being able to lead in that environment is a very different task. I'd actually say, now that I've done both, to take a startup, provided the vision is sound and the business model makes sense, to take a startup to a successful place is frankly a lot easier leadership challenge than once you've had success. It's so easy for a team to become complacent or to live in this world of rationalizations and denials before they are going to accept this next disruptive change in technology that's about to change their success. That's a very difficult thing to accept, and something you really have to have your eye on every day if you're going to live in this world.
So we're going to talk more about that in a second, but one of the things that when we were prepping and talking about this is that you have a motto about how you cope with this constant change. So why don't you share it with us and tell me just a little bit about how that affects even maybe your decision making or how you approach things. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll first say it's not my original thought. Actually, the CTO at UUNet years ago shared this with me, and I think it really resonates. He says, we have to run towards fear. And having the sense of what the next horizon of change and opportunity will be, whether it's one out or even two out, and the willingness to make investments towards that. It's so easy, particularly when you've had success, to get caught up in the day-to-day operating results, and, you know, meeting the street's desire this quarter. Being able to accept that there's got to be something more we're going after and pursuing it. At Equinix, we call it a higher purpose. Where are we trying to get, and what do we want to be? And so by using that to trump those day-to-day decisions, it just makes it a lot easier of a guiding leadership principle. And so we just try and continue to exercise that every day.
And it seems like that maybe that is part of the secret sauce, if you will, that you use to run towards for this idea of the higher purpose?
At Equinix, we view our opportunity is to be the hubs where all the routes of the internet meet, and then all the destinations for those routes are also customers. And now with the cloud, we see this evolving to have many cloud service providers as customers, and we've done that. And many enterprises, in the way they consume IT going forward, will come to our data center to be able to interconnect with all those wide range of services there. So
so that's your higher purpose.
Our higher purpose is to be the connection and home for the digital world. It's as simple as that.
And so how does that help you to drive towards this idea of running towards fear?
I think the team gets inspired. And if you think about that, that's historically significant. If that's where all this happens, then it's a lot easier to not get caught up in the day-to-day. And so leading with that is something that actually we'll start many meetings with. It's just a great mantra to rally a team around.
So I think as we kind of carry this idea of running towards fear, and what you just described, I think leads us to another, I think, key point that in the conversations that we've had that kind of resonated with me, and this idea of kind of continual reinvention, this never standing in place. And so I guess my first question for you is, how many times in your professional life have you had to reinvent yourself, either personally or organizationally?
That's probably a good question, but if I was to think about it quickly, 5, maybe 6 times. You know, think about that very first time trying to convince somebody the value of email when all they had ever used in their life is a telephone. In my past, we had a networking capability frame relay at CompuServe. Well, at UUNet, we were moving to a public IP, TCP/IP, the internet protocol, and selling VPN services that basically wiped that technology out at the time. And so now as we see what initially was our vision for Equinix, and that being the interconnection point for the internet, well, now it's the cloud. And believe me, we're making significant investment to go play our role in that environment. And those investments are something, again, you need to see the vision and be willing to pursue it, running towards fear.
And I think what's interesting about that, I mean, Equinix is a company that's been wildly successful and really almost from the beginning, yet it's gone through these reinventions. And so one of the things that when I was kind of reflecting and preparing for this struck me is like, well, how do you simultaneously be successful and yet not rest on those laurels, not want to say, oh, this is great, we've got the magic here, we're going to stick to our guns, and yet you've managed to continually reinvent yourself. How do you do that?
Well, first of all, it's the team you put together, and I think you need to obviously get very talented, innovative people, and so many technology companies do that. But I think we hire on human qualities as much as that. And by that I mean ego maturity, integrity, loyalty, trust. You have to have a significant amount of trust on a team. We'll begin a meeting with, okay, what are the brutal facts? And those brutal facts might point to somebody in the room who worked very hard to create that initiative. But frankly, it's not working. And yet that's a very talented person. So you need to have that ego maturity so that we can have a very calm, emotionally detached conversation about where we go from here. So that's that first foundation of it. And then what you need to do is make sure there's enough energy and focus on a given set of resource that they aren't looking back at past operating results. We started a team, we called it the Cloud Acceleration Team, CAT, in Equinix. But basically it was taking key leaders and talent around the company. You're going to get up and you're going to do this every day. And that's just been over 2 years now. And the result is, if you've tracked our success in it, all the major CSPs now, or the cloud service providers, are customers, standing up their infrastructure around the world in our data centers to be able to connect to their customers and connect to those networks that help them perform. So all of that has transpired in this 2-year cycle, but it's really been a case of the next disruption and stepping up to it.
So I want to pick up on this ego maturity question, because I think, or this idea of ego maturity, because I think it's something that is really hard to get your head around sometimes. And specifically, I mean, I've been in corporate environments for quite a bit, and a lot of times the challenges with this start at the top. It's the executive, whoever's leading, or the team leader that doesn't have that maturity, right? So I guess my question for you is, how do you personally deal with that? How do you personally create and foster that kind of ego maturity that you're talking about?
Well, a culture starts with its leaders. So I think you're on target in the way you've asked the question. But I made a decision. I was the CEO for the first half of this 15-year run. But personal decision that was right for me and my family at the time was that I needed to find some balance to the day-to-day there and go find the next CEO. So we went out looking for a new CEO. And I remember the search firm, the lead for them, saying that, well, there's no way we'll find somebody worthwhile for you if they're going to have the old guy standing around looking over their shoulder, you know? And so I get that, but I said, we haven't found the right guy if that's the case. And we did find the right guy, a fellow named Steve Smith, who's frankly tripled the size of the company since he came on board. But I think I had to demonstrate the ego maturity and be willing to accept, if we're going to have a CEO, that is the CEO, and I'm there to make him successful. And he, in turn, has to have the ego maturity, we chose well, to understand that, well, maybe the old guy has some thought or tribal knowledge that could be helpful day to day. And it has worked out that way. He is regularly in my office, or I'm in his, exchanging ideas. What do you think about this? I could be meeting with one of his direct reports, a CFO, in my office. We're right across the hall from each other, by the way. And so as he goes by, he doesn't even look in an understanding that this is all about the common purpose of making Equinix this historically significant company. And so from the top, between his and my ego maturity, I think that permeates. Your leaders are the culture of your organization.
So that goes, I mean, I think you tied back into this higher purpose thing that really helps drive that, but is there anything specific that you have done, the techniques? I mean, because I think it's hard, right? I mean, because I don't want this to go, well, you either have it or you don't. Right. How do you develop this maturity? How do you get comfortable with that?
Well, I hate to say this, but it's just seasoning as an executive and seeing things happen, I guess. Certainly it developed over time, and self-awareness is a very powerful thing. But when you get to the point in your career where you can look back on it, feel good about it, connect the dots on why it was successful or not, then you know who you are. And so knowing that and seeing the value Steve can bring and getting out of the way when that value shows up, or understanding when, well, maybe I don't agree with this, but ultimately we're at a point in time where I can do that publicly and we can debate in front of the whole team. Early on, I wouldn't dare do that. I was very thoughtful. In fact, when I made this decision, I got out of the hallways for the first 3 months so that the line of executives to the CEO's office didn't get derailed into, had to make it clear who was boss. And now we've developed this ongoing working relationship, and frankly, it's a good model, it works, and I see the value of that. It's not about me, so.
So I want to go back to what we were talking about, disruption and the continual reinvention, and I'm curious of something. You didn't really talk about it, but was part of the drive there this tying into looking how customers were using the different technology? I mean, going all the way back to the CompuServe days through UNet and then through Equinix, I mean, were there periods in time where you were actually looking and saying, oh my gosh, our customers are using this technology or the services in ways that we didn't expect, and that is what part of what led you to this disruption or this reinvention?
Yes, I'll even use a recent example. The interesting run we had in the internet was all about enabling this big, I'll call it consumer platform, right? And all the different things that were evolving from social media to video to well, you name it. Today, I think as we approach the cloud and pursue the enterprise, and this is a world you're thinking about all the time, Charlie, it's moving from what historically in the enterprise had been technology to manage systems of record. You know, that we're tracking the business. How have we done? All the things they need to be able, and it's data, you look at it and you make future decisions from it. But I think a CIO's task becomes very different now. It's systems of engagement. All these things that work, social media, mobile, and how you reach and interact with customers, CIO has got to think like an executive in the early internet, and how do I reach those users, and how is that a productive experience in interacting with the firm. And so seeing that transition is something I think we have our head around, and it positions us very well for what the future will look like. But when we have to try and bring a CIO to us, where it's a lot of education still. It's early days, and this is what you study a lot, but certain CIOs will lean forward, maybe run towards fear, and we've had some lighthouse wins with those CIOs and very interesting companies that are moving everything to the cloud. And they're coming out of their basement or their data center and actually moving their infrastructure to the cloud by coming to Equinix. It's a great answer for them, but many of these CIOs are still caught up in their old business models and used to using capital and having teams that they're accountable for, that they've led and care about, and now shifting that to a cloud-based model. There's a lot of change there, and it gets back to what we talked about earlier. Those that are denial or rationalizing against it, you know, they'll competitively be late.
So that goes back to that running towards fear question. But I think one of the things that is interesting to me is that you have to develop this awareness of listening to the customers and more importantly, seeing the things that you didn't see, right? Because I think for a lot of IT people, this is the challenge, right? We go and invest in this technology platform, we sign up with Equinix, whatever it is, and we start going down this road, and we think it's because of X, Y, or Z, and we take this very dogmatic approach to, well, that's what it's for.
Right.
And we don't look up and go, oh, but the customer is doing something completely different with it. And so I guess my question, because I'm always all about the approach or attitude to remain open to this, what have you done or how have you infused this into your teams to create this awareness?
Well, I've always been a services guy in my career, right? Everything I talked about, we were a service company. And so the depth of those customer relationships has to drive it all. And I think you've even participated in one. You helped lead what we call a customer advisory board meeting, where we bring in our customers who we just value, certainly for the business relationship, but for their forward thinking. And we have them in a room fully understanding where they're going and why they need to get there. And by taking those customers' ideas and models and really creating a template that, this is the path to the cloud, and going to those less aggressive CIOs with a template that says, here's the logical route, here's who it's worked for in the past, you actually start to enable the cloud for all these companies. And so I think that's the role you can play, and being a service company gives you access to those customers in a different way than if we just sold them a product.
It's funny though, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I also hear this almost a service, more than just a service company, a service attitude, and it kind of goes back to this higher purpose thing, right? Mm-hmm. So, how else, what are the different ways that I can play that out in terms of, because it sounds like it's all about building relationships from your perspective, right?
If I stand in front of the sales force, then the number one thing we're selling is trust. And being able to get to a deep enough relationship with a customer, because frankly, and this is where CIOs are today, how do I trust getting to the cloud? And assuring that they believe in what we're doing for them and we don't let them down are how we have to think about customers every day. So.
And what I think is funny
is the secret sauce.
And that's really what CIOs need to be doing with their customers now too, right? Yeah. It's about this continuing this chain forward.
Well, I get it. They have to be leaders in a digital world. They have to step up if they're going to leverage the opportunity that's in front of them. But just some of the applications that are enabled by the cloud can be too attractive for a given business, and you just need to get there if you're going to compete.
So I'd like to wrap this up by making it a little bit more personal and kind of bringing it back. So as you look back on this career, and again, I think it's fascinating because you've lived your entire professional life in this world of online and the cloud and all of that. As you look back on that, and if you're speaking to the up-and-coming leaders, the leaders of the future, yeah, what is the one key takeaway they should take from your experiences, the thing that they should go do tomorrow to prepare for this future?
As quickly as they can, define the look of the next change that will be coming that impacts them. And it's all about making the right bets. Then sometimes you're very lucky. I would agree that's me. But ultimately, if you don't have a vision for what that will be, and you're mired in just optimizing the performance of what you have today, then I think that will end badly. And so run towards fear. Find it and pursue it.
Perfect. I think that was some great advice, and I think people are going to get a lot out of this. So thank you very much for being on the TransformIT show.
Great, Charlie. It's good to be here.
PVC challenged us to run towards fear, not away from it. That's the starting point, the most important point. If you're unwilling to embrace the uncertainty that we now live within, you will be unable to adapt as the future unfolds. Which leads us to a second point, that you must be willing to continually reinvent yourself. As the pace of change continues to increase, you must resist the desire to get comfortable. I think that's particularly important to IT leaders as we struggle with all of our legacy. And finally, we need to build deep, trust-based relationships with our customers so that we can tune into how our customers are using our technologies and services, especially when they're using them in unexpected ways, so that we can figure out both where and when we should be reinventing ourselves. And there you have it. That's your challenge. Let me know what you think using the Twitter hashtag TransformIT or by sharing a comment here on the episode page. Also, make sure you check out the resources that both Intel and we at the IT Transformation Institute have made available for you. You can check them out at www.intel.com/IT-center and on our website at www.transformingit.org. Well, that's it for this episode of the TransformIT Show. I'm Charles Araujo, and together we can change the world of IT.